Welcome everyone to this Christmas edition of Armchair Interviews, and again we've got Mark back. So I'd like Mark to give a nice Christmassy
nice introduction
to the video.
Well, it's got to be, you know, 'twas the night before Christmas and all that. You know, it's Ebenezer Scrooge. It's a nice subject. I mean, the subject's ghosts, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I mean,
ghosts and hauntings.
It's like when they have an argument over, you know, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Well, it's the same kind of thing with Christmas Carol. It's ghosts, but what's that really got to do with Christmas? You know, well, who cares? It's a Christmas thing, so that's what we're doing. We're doing a Christmas thing. I'm fueled by sausage and egg butties, so anything could happen in the next hour.
Yeah, without full, we could end up just falling.
Oh, yeah, that's why they're cutting it off where they're cutting it off, because, you know, there's a lot going on down here at the moment. And I'm green. I'm not black, I'm green. That's because it's Christmas, so nobody can say that I've never done an interview wearing colour, which I haven't done up to this point, actually, but there we go, I'm Christmassy green. But I drew the line at a Christmas hat and a set of, you know, silly reindeer antlers, like, you know.
Yeah, I think it would have looked good with a pair of reindeer antlers, antlers and a red nose.
Yeah, if I'd not bothered to trim my beard, you know, and just kind of put a Santa hat on. Yeah, okay.
We're missing the tinsel.
Yeah, missing a trick there, aren't we? But no, it's a Christmas special. Why not? Yeah, very much in the spirit of Christmas Carol. Ghosts. Yeah, do you want to just kind of launch in?
Why not? Yeah, let's get into it.
Right, well, ghosts are a good subject because I definitely wouldn't be sat here now if it wasn't for a ghost, which I'm going to have to definitely give you some details on that. Obviously, when I was tiny, when I was a kid, you know, three years old, I started playing the drums and stuff like that. So a lot of the focus when I was a kid was all on music, and, you know, you're in the late 1960s, so there's music just pumping out the radio. It's coming out from everywhere. You know, drifting into the sort of 1970-ish. Well, in 1970, that was the year when I was sort of going 7, going on 8, sort of that year, and that was quite an important year because we moved house. I used to live on Ellesmere Road, which is this road that runs along the side of the Manchester Ship Canal. And my mum and dad decided it would be nice to get a house a bit nearer to the school where I was going, junior school. So we moved into the centre of Stockton Heath and bought this socking great big semi-detached house on Edgerton Street, which back then was buttons because you didn't pay a lot for houses back in the 60s and 70s, not like you do now. And so age 7, we moved into this big house, and I minded my own business. It was it wasn't actually the night before Christmas, but it was a dark and stormy night. You know, you can tell where we're going with this. It was winter. It was definitely winter, because my birthday falls in December. So hey, you can all send me birthday wishes. Mine falls in December, so it's going to be December, January. You know, that I'm sort of in that year where I'm going 7 and then going into being 8 the next year. Spring. It's actually going to be in the spring, I think, but it's still dark. It's dark nights. It's cold. I'm in a strange house. And this particular night, I wake up in the night. So I wake up and it's dark. Everything's blacked out. I'm sort of getting used to the property at this point. I'm getting used to the environment. So it's not a scary environment. And it must have been in the early hours. So you're in what is traditionally thought of as the haunting hours, you know, either side of 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Everything's deadly quiet. So I'm lying in my bed and I wake up and I'm aware of the fact that the bedroom is freezing. It's icy cold. Now, generally speaking, the house is cold anyway. You know, back in the day you could get ice on the inside of your windows because you didn't have central heating.
Yeah, I do remember that.
You know, things used to freeze inside the house. But this was particularly cold in a different sort of cold, right through to the bones. And I thought, okay, what's going on? So I looked up, and bottom corner of the bed, sort of away from me, that's where my wardrobe is. So you've got a door over there, you've got a wardrobe there, and the rest of the bedroom's on the right-hand side. In front of this wardrobe is a figure. And from where I'm lying, this figure looks to be about 7 or 8 foot tall, enormously tall, because certainly taller than the height of the wardrobe. But I am looking up, so maybe that was an exaggerated height, you know. And I'm staring at this figure, and it's in full colour. So forget these, you know, white sheets on coat hangers and all that. This figure's in full colour, and I can see he's wearing like a green and brown fleck tweed jacket. So very much like, you know, just lots and lots of green and brown flecks all over like that. And it's open. He's got a matching waistcoat. He's got a pocket watch. I can tell he's got a pocket watch there. He's dark haired. He's got, I'm going to say blue eyes, but they were very piercing and very dark, and they're staring straight at me. He's a bit gaunt and looks a bit like the sort of typical Victorian gentleman. I'm assuming that the trousers and all the rest of it match the rest of his suit. So he's basically wearing a tweed 3-piece suit. And he's just kind of there, but you know, apart from the fact he looks really tall, it does look a bit like he's kind of hovering, you know, and I can see the wardrobe through him. So that's a bit of a giveaway. He's not really there, but he is there. He's clearly there. Now, when you're 7 years old and you've watched all these ghosty movies and stuff back in the 60s and 70s, you expect to see some kind of floating white apparition. You know, that's a ghost. But I'm looking at this guy, and this guy's looking back at me, and it just seemed to go on for ages. There was no time involved. It was just like we were just looking at each other just for ages and ages and ages. And then common sense kicks in, and you think, right, number one, what the hell's he doing in my bedroom? Number two, I shouldn't be able to see the wardrobe through the back of him. And number three, I'm absolutely terrified. So basically I did what any kid would do: grab the bed sheets, disappear under the bed sheets, bury yourself and hide. No idea how long I was in there. I haven't got a clue. Don't even know if I fell asleep and woke back up again, but I had no idea at all. But eventually I emerge. It's still dark, it's still the early hours, and the bedroom's actually quite warm, and all the lighting and everything is just, it's still dark, it's still the same bedroom. It just felt different, and the figure's gone. It's not there. Okay, so now you're ticking through that. It would have been 1970, I think. That's the year where I'm 7. Because I'm born in the December, I spend most of that age in the following year. I've got like 11 and a half months in the following year when I'm that age. So that would have been 1970, I'm pretty sure, 1970. And that year, I'm starting to wonder about ghosts. What are ghosts all about? What's supernatural all about? Anyone that grew up in that time, late 60s, early 70s, you had things like the Armada Book of Ghosts, you know, and later on, I mean, a bit further on, you had Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and all that, you know. The first UFO books came out in the 1950s and 60s, you know. A big thing was Loch Ness Monster, you know, that was everywhere back then. So the early beginnings of cryptids, that starts as well in the 60s and 70s. So there's quite a lot of material knocking around, you know. Even at junior school, you'd get, you know, these books for reading. You'd have reading clubs. You'd have the Armada Book of Ghosts, you know, the Armada Book of Monsters, the Armada this, that and the other. So I, pretty much from that point on, I started collecting that sort of material. I got myself quite a nice little, you know, bookcase and filled it full of stuff. So by the time I'm like 8, 9 years old, I'm starting to get a bit more clued up on what's going on. So that really, I mean, that is important, because that is the beginning of everything. That's the point at which, from being, you know, some guy that just wanted to grow up to be a drummer and play in a rock band, all of a sudden I'm switched on to the idea that there's a lot more going on that we don't see. So then, of course, at this point, I am now effectively living in a haunted house, you know, trying to explain, you know, as a kid, to my parents, you know, what I'd seen, and they're like, no, you must have been dreaming, you know, a load of rubbish. Post-war, typical rough, tough northern, you know what I mean? No, lad, you're definitely wrong, you didn't see that. A load of rubbish, you know, you don't want to get involved in all that. Also, I'd met a few, there was a couple of grandparents that hung out with some of the kids at the junior school who basically kept open house at weekends. So I went down to the neighbouring village of Gratnall, hung out with these grandparents of these kids, and it was like a big, you know, we could run around and all that, and they were into witchcraft, which I think I might have covered. I might have covered that before. So that's going on in this period as well. But then you've got this block of time up to me being about 15. So you've got, let's say halfway through that 7th year up to 15. So you've got about 7 years, 8 years of living in this environment where stuff happens. So I can give you some stories about that, let me tell you. Eventually I moved the bed. The bed was sort of behind the door, so eventually we swung it round sideways on and moved it to a different position. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the door from the right hand side. So the wardrobe's still where it was, but that's sort of over here somewhere now. So I can see the door and stuff like that. One particularly memorable night, early hours again, I don't think it was 3 a.m, I don't think it was quite as late as that, it was probably between midnight and 1. But I'd been asleep, because obviously I'm still at school, and you wake up in the night and you hear this bump, 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 and you're thinking, what on earth is that? And then it goes bump, 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 and you're like, that sounds like something coming up and down the stairs. Now, this is where things start to get interesting, because I'll throw this little piece of information in at this point. When we bought the house, it's number 13. It was built in 1924 at a time when they did not build number 13s. You had your 12As and your 11As and all this kind of thing. They did everything they could possibly do to avoid putting 13 on a house. This was like, ta-da, this is number 13, hey, with 13 windows in the property, 13 openings into the property. There were 13 large sandstone blocks in the back garden, so there's a big circle of stones out there. And there's 13 steps up the stairs. It takes 13 steps to get up and 13 steps to get down. And then just to kind of chuck it in there, the house is actually aligned north, south, east, west. So like the sun rises perfectly at the back and goes straight over the top of the house and sets perfectly in front of the house. And it's the biggest house on the street, and it was built by the guy who pretty much developed the whole area, the local developer. So he was a bit of an odd gentleman. So we're dealing with a bit of a weird property. Anyway, I'm switched on to this by now. I've done my research. I know something's going on. Anyway, bum, 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 bum. Next minute you get this bum, 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 bum. And I'm lying in bed and I'm thinking, that sounds like cloven hooves. It doesn't sound like feet. It sounds like it's padding on hooves. So I'm just thinking, right, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you, you beggar. I'm not letting you get away with this. So next time it comes back up the stairs, bum, 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 gets louder. I'm like, right, you're on the landing. So I flew out of bed, flicked all the lights on, because I can flick the bedroom light on, it floods the landing, and then I can flick the landing light on, and there's nothing. Nothing at all. So I'm like, okay, check all the doors. My mum and dad are asleep in their room, there's nothing going on, the front door's locked and all that. So I'm like, okay, so I went back to bed, switched all the lights off. Sure enough, bum, 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 it starts again. So I'm like, do you know what, I'm not playing silly beggars, I just went back to sleep. I was at the point where I was quite used to this sort of supernatural stuff going on. So, eventually, of course, living in a haunted house, your teenage mates, so we're moving on a bit now, 12, 13, 14, start to take a bit more of an interest. And like, hey, come on, let's, tarot cards, Ouija boards, crystal balls, anything we can do. Let's see if we can talk to them, Well, we were a bit more sophisticated than that by the time we got to teenagers, because we had, all these Ouija boards where you put your finger on, and you're like, it could be anybody. Somebody could be pushing that. I know you've got the planchette and the glass and all the rest of it, and yes, I do believe it works, not necessarily in a good way, because the Victorians invented some stuff that is better off left alone. But what we had is we had a huge ball bearing, big silver chrome ball bearing, and a big sheet of metal with all the letters on. And what you would do is put that in the middle of the room and just put the ball in the middle, and then all sit round the edge. Nobody actually had any physical contact with it at all. And this thing worked. It would roll back and two under its own thing. So we were doing that occasionally. Didn't get any meaningful messages, really. That having been said, we were the second owners of the property from the guy who built it. So he'd lived in it for 60 plus years or whatever. So we didn't know anything about him or his family, other than when he died, his son didn't want the house, and that's how we ended up with it. So it could have been them coming through. It could have been anything coming through at the end. A couple of the sessions we did that, we hid a tape recorder, cassette player. We hid one in the cupboard to see if we picked up anything. And on a couple of those, picked up voices. Old technology though, magnetic tape. You know. So we did all that. We did the sort of quote Ghostbustery things. But there was one particular very memorable night. And what we did was there was me, a couple of lads and a girl who were all mates. We all hung out, and they're like, "Yeah, hey, come on, let's go up and do something in the haunted room." So it's like, "Yeah, okay." So we all go marching up, one behind the other. The one behind me, I think, was the girl, and then the two lads are at the back, and we go marching upstairs. Turn into the bedroom door like that. Bedroom door swings open. Now at this point I've got stuff hanging all over the walls. I've always collected swords and guns and weapons and stuff like that. And I've got a Second World War leather holster hanging on the wall not far from the light switch. So door swings open, flicks the light switch on, this leather holster comes flying off the wall. It's nailed to the wall, comes flying off the wall and shoots across the bedroom. And the girl definitely saw it because she went, "Ah!" like you do. And the lad behind was like, "Did I just see that?" So of course at this point everybody falls silent because we've had stuff move because we've had this ball rolling round and stuff like that, but we've not had objects at this point. So I'm like, "Hey, I live here, I'm used to this all the time." And don't worry about it, maybe it was, gust of wind or whatever, trying to explain it away. Went over to the bed on the other side of the room, fished his gun holster off the bed, brought it back, firmly positioned it back on the wall, and we all looked at each other and went, "I wonder what would happen if we did that again. Let's have another go." So we all backed out the room, switched the light off, shut the door. Right, we'll do it again. So we staged it again this time. We did it again. Swung the door open, and of course they're all like this, nosy. Swung the door open, flick the light switch on, and this thing shoots across the room again. At which point, it's like, no, we're going back downstairs again. We're not playing. This is not the right time to be doing this. And that's in front of witnesses. I still know that lass actually. She's a bit of a witchy character. She lives down in Hereford, so that's a witness. She saw that happen. She still talks about it. And then of course you start getting other witnesses. Another friend, he came round to call. I'm going to say I'm about 13 or 14 at this point. So we left junior school, we've moved on to high school now, still teens. And he came round to call on me, a lad called John. And we had a front gate, and the gate swings open and you go to the front door. So you've got a short distance to go, probably about 12 foot, 15 foot from the gate to the door. So he opens the gate, and there's a pause, and then he rings the doorbell, and I open the door, and the first words out of his mouth are, "You're dead posh, you are." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm dead posh?" He said, "Well, I haven't got a black and white TV set in my bedroom, but you've got one in yours." And I'm looking at him and I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't got a TV set in my bedroom." He said, "Well, I've just walked up to the front door and I can see the light from your TV set." So you can imagine the light you used to get from black and white TVs, like a flickering white. He said, "Well, I can see it." I said, "Well, I'm not even in my bedroom. I'm downstairs watching TV with the family downstairs in the front room." He's like, "Come out and have a look." So the pair of us go out and we look up and it's black, it's just dark, there's nothing happening at all. At which point he's obviously very convinced now that this is a haunted house. He's seen something. He's seen the typical white lit up apparition, something going on up there, and just assumed it was light from a television set. When I start getting in my teens, I really start getting enthusiastic about archaeology because my dad had me on a dig when I was 8 years old. So again, through this time period, I'm researching history. Well, fortunately, where we live, because it's Stockton Heath Village, that's got a reputation for archaeology because it's part of the Wilderspool Roman settlement, which has been excavated for 250 years. They keep falling over bits of Roman stuff everywhere. So I do my research and I start looking at, well, what's going on? You know, where are we in the Roman scheme of things? Blow me if we're not built on the cemetery. It's a Romano-Saxon cemetery. So the school opposite, the road, us, the buildings behind us, and the rest of the street, beyond the Manchester Ship Canal, all of that were the burials that ran either side of the main Roman road that went into Wilderspool Roman settlement. And sure enough, I mean, I can bring this one right up to date. When we were doing the series Lost Treasures, which would be probably season 3, 2007, they started doing excavations for a rebuild at the school. So you could literally look across the road and there's trenches everywhere, all over. And they're digging up burials, Roman monuments, you know, cremation urns with the cremations in. They've found part of an Anglo-Saxon cross. And this is, you know, what, 20 foot, 30 foot in front of where we live. Now, we know we're built on the same stuff because every time you dig in the back garden, you go straight through the soil, and as soon as you hit the sand, you're on the Roman level. It's only about a metre down.
Yeah.
So, maybe, just maybe, if you want a haunted house, you build it on a graveyard.
And that's what usually comes up when you're watching some of these horror films, isn't it? It's always
Salem's Lot and all that sort of thing, yeah. Yeah, oh, very much so. So when you start to put the pieces together, historically, at that time, back in the 1970s, it all starts to make sense. So that kind of rounds this section off quite nicely, because as I said, I wouldn't really be the person I am today had that, whatever it was, ghost apparition, the guy in the green and brown tweed three-piece suit, had that not appeared, I would never have known any of this, because it sent me off down a particular path.
Yeah.
And there's a slight kicker there, because 11 years after I saw him, so now you're in the 80s, you start in the early 1980s, I had Auntie Alice. She was very old, and her side of the family were very big. They were big Freemasons, they were big into the occult, they were big into owning property in Warrington and things like that. She had a big box full of photos. And I'm going through these photos, and I pull this guy's face out on this photo. So I'm like, who's this? And it's one of my relatives. It's a guy by the name of Trow. I think it's Thomas Trow. And I'm like, that looks exactly like the fella that appeared to me 11 years before. So now you're into anything, you know, is it a portal? Is it because we're on a cemetery, they can come back from the dead? Is it frequency? I don't think the guy in the green and brown tweed suit is related or tied to the property in the same way that all the spooky activity is. But I do think it's one of my relatives, distant relatives from the Victorian era, 1800s, 1860s, 1870s. And I think he's come through. He's took the opportunity at that point to visit me. And it's just made me, you know, who I am today.
So, but not only that, you're on a burial ground.
Yeah.
And then there's you yourself who have experiences anyway. You're sort of I'm not going to say a medium, but you experience things.
Yeah, by default.
Yeah.
You could say that, yeah. I am a medium by default.
Yeah. So them two things coming together, that's why he turned up, and that's probably why he felt he could show himself.
I think most people that end up having an interest in the supernatural, it starts from, or even cryptids, starts from an encounter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And that's how I started. It's, you know, but as you say, I've got the aptitude for it anyway. I'm hanging out with people who are that way inclined anyway. I'm sat on a graveyard anyway, in the weirdest possible house. The house, of course, is still there. Now, there's a big gap because by the time I reached 2021, I got married, moved out, as you do. So So from the age of 2021, so you're talking sort of early 1980s, which is where we left the story off, I'm living elsewhere. Now, I've got loads of other experiences that don't relate, that don't tie in to that particular property. And my mum and dad swore to the dying day that they never had anything happen. But that's not strictly true. Because, of course, eventually I come drifting back. And I'm drifting back to the family home this time because we had the pandemic, we had the lockdown, 2019 and all that sort of stuff. Relationships have come to an end, kids have grown up and left home, I'm living away. I've been living in this house, that I was in for 17 and a half years. It just made sense to come back, in 2020. My dad, at this point, my mum's passed away. She passed away in 2015. My dad cared for her right to the very end. So that sort of period of life just ended. And it left me dad stranded in this fucking great big house full of junk, etc. So we waded in, sort the house out. We'll do the house up, we'll get the builders in. And I'll get, once it's habitable, I'll get shut of my house and I'll move back in. So I get shut of my house and I move back in. Now, builders are a breed of their own, a rough, tough, conglomeration of people with skills and experiences. So I put a team together to do the house, and the team came together in 2018, 2019, and we formed a bubble. We literally adopted particular builders. So we had one guy that did like woodworking and all that sort of handyman stuff, and another one that was plasters and brickwork, and there was a foreman guy, and boy, what he could do with a small digger, you wouldn't believe it. He could do somersaults in this digger. But he's the first sort of major story of a new phase, because we're starting again now. We're back in the house again. What's the house going to do? Well, this house is full of strangers. What we decided is that the house it reacts to different people in different ways. So if it kind of knows you, and you're okay with the ghosts and the ghosts are okay with you, then they kind of leave you alone and nothing happens. Forget it with the builders. Builders are a different thing altogether. So, great story again, front gate, about 12, 15 foot away from the front door. And I watched this happen because I was looking out the downstairs front room window, and this builder, he's probably in his mid to late 60s, covered in military tattoos, ex-SAS, older man bodybuilder. So you get the idea, he's only about 5 foot nothing, but he's 10 foot wide, you know what I mean? Irish as well. Comes through the front gate, walks through the front gate. First thing he does is he looks up to what is now my dad's bedroom, which is the upstairs big bedroom, the front bedroom, and he waves like that and smiles, and then walks up to the front door, knocks on the front door. So I come out the front room, it's directly onto the front door. I open the front door. The first words out of his mouth is, "Your dad's looking really well." And I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I just waved to him. He stood in the bedroom window up there." I said, I just waved to him. White beard and all that. He's scrubbed up really well, but I don't know why he's wearing his hat. Which wouldn't have been unusual, because occasionally my dad did put a flat hat on. Because at this point my dad's got Alzheimer's dementia, so he does some odd things. Wouldn't have been strange, except my dad is stood at the back kitchen sink doing the washing up. So I said to this builder, I said, "Don't know who you waved to." I said, "But it's not my dad." I said, "It is, it's your dad." Absolutely convinced. Irish accent, I can't do an Irish accent, but "It's your dad." And I'm like, "No, I'll show you. He stood at the back kitchen sink washing." Now my dad's like heading on to late 80s at this point. There's no way he's going to get from the bedroom to the back kitchen sink in 30 seconds. That isn't going to happen. And you could just watch the colour of this builder, this kind of healthy looking builder just went white as a sheet. And I'm like, "Funny you should say that. There are two ghosts here that we get to see a lot." I said, "One of them's a little kid, a boy, and he seems to be the source of the mischief." And I said, "And the other one is an old fellow with a flat hat." I said, that's the other ghost. He says, oh, you've just seen a ghost. Anyway, this guy looked like he'd seen a ghost, you know. And then other things happened as well, because it didn't happen so much with the DIY bloke who was doing all the woodworking and stuff like that. But I bet you every couple of weeks he'd be saying, do you know what, I have no idea where my screwdriver's gone. I had it here in my toolkit, there's no screwdriver now, you know. Or he'd be saying, I can't get a decent cup of tea. He said, I put my cup down, I don't know where it's gone. It turned up somewhere else where he didn't leave it, and it had gone cold, you know. And this is, you know, for him it was every few weeks, like every 3 or 4 weeks. The guy doing the plastering and the brickworking, that's another story. This was every other day. He really was getting upset, especially when he first came to work, because he was saying, look, I'm sick of it. He said, I'll put the hammer down, I'll turn away, I'll turn back to pick the hammer up and it's gone. Or pliers, or trowels, or in one case, I think it was a bucket of plaster. He said, the bucket of plaster is going to go off. You know, we're losing money here. You know, I wish you'd tell whoever it is that's doing this to stop, you know, pranking me and mucking me about. So we did actually get to the point where we all builders, everybody working, glazers that were putting in windows, building a conservatory, brickies, anyone doing work in the garden, anywhere, all of them, we told all of them, if you find anything unusual, let us know, no matter what it is, no matter how strange it might appear, and if anything odd happens, just report back to us. Because you're in a haunted house, you know. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. Give it a couple of months, they weren't laughing. Not anymore. You know, because like things like these screwdrivers, hammers and stuff like that, they turn up in a bucket somewhere else, in a different part of the house, about 3 or 4 days later. But down to like fine details, you know, you're knocking nails in to keep plasterboard up and stuff like that, you turn around, your nails are gone. You know, and there's no way it can be happening by accident because we're under lockdown, so, you know, we're a bubble. The only people that are in the property are the people working in the property, and me and my dad.
Yeah.
My dad's too old, and I don't muck about like that. I'm not that kind of joker. And then there's a nice little, again, I love it when stories tie up. So you get to the point where some of the builders had drifted off. We'd finished doing all the glazing work, the conservatory's up, shed's built. A lot of the brickwork on the front's done. So at this point, we've only really got like the Irish guy, and I think the plasterer had finished as well. So we've only got the Irish guy and the DIY guy. The DIY guy's there all the time. There's so much to do. He was just 5 days a week. You know, he probably made about 10 grand off us during lockdown, because it was really only him that we needed more than anybody else. But he's bobbing in and out, and then you've got so this foreman, the Irish guy, says we need to see what's happening under the property, because we've got a half cellar. So the way this thing's built, there's no damp course. It's single skin walls on the house. And what they did was they dug a socking great big hole under the house, about 6 or 8 foot deep. And there used to be a foundry, an iron foundry, over the wall at the back. So they went round to the iron foundry and said, can we have all your ash and your clinker? And we'll partly fill up this hole, and that's your soak away. So we never get damp, and we never get flooded, because it all vanishes down this big hole and disappears. But what the builder wanted to know was how structurally secure are the floors, because 2 of the rooms have these soakaways underneath, half cellars, about 4 foot deep, and then the rest of it's ash.
Yeah, there's one under here.
Yeah, they work brilliantly, fantastic way of drainage. Everybody else is getting flooded, and we don't. So what we do is, there's in the floorboards in one of these rooms, you can just see there's 3 of the boards have got a line running in them. And if you get something in there and really poke around, these 3 boards pop out. And you've got this tiny little hatch, which you could get through if you really wanted to. I'd have to diet to get through it, but it's a tiny little hatch. So he said, right, what we'll do, mobile phone technology. They've got a light on a mobile phone. You can film on a mobile phone. So get a mobile phone going and stick your arm through the hole and do a 360. And what we'll do is we'll relax and we'll just put it up on the TV screen, and we'll see what condition everything's in. If you think there's any weaknesses under the floor, you can tip the phone up and we'll actually look like you're physically looking. Sure enough, it's full of spiders, you know what I mean? It looks like stage set from Dracula, you know, down there. So that's what we do. check it all out. It's all dry, all the woodwork looks alright. You know, bottom of the fireplace is on pillars and that looks alright. Swinging the camera around like that. Oh, hang on a minute. Pause. Just in the top layer of ash, just about, I don't know, a couple of yards in, 6 or 8 foot in, there's a flat hat on top of the ash. It's the same flat hat that this Irish bloke saw the guy upstairs wearing. It's one of his hats. So there is actually a physical piece of the guy that built the place in that half cellar, and it's his hat. So, you know, when all these little threads all come together, you know. Anyway, all the builders went away convinced the house is haunted. There was no problems at all in convincing them that something was wrong. In this same phase, though, my dad wasn't the kind of person who got the Alzheimer's and dementias that you see in the movies. He wasn't like that. His memory was shot, but the rest of him was fine. You know, and to some extent he could remember things, but it's that classic thing where you lose your short-term memory, but your long-term memory kind of takes over. So he wasn't barking mad, he wasn't nuts or anything like that. And there were 2 incidents that stick out, because obviously he'd lived there a while, a couple of years before we got stuck in doing the place up, and then he lived another couple of years with me in there at the same time. Well, during the period when he was on his own, we came in one day, and he said, who was that lady that was here the other week? We're like, I don't know. You're on your own. Who did you let in? You know, who was it? No, I didn't let her in. She came in to say goodbye to the house. That's a great story, this. So I never rubbished anything he said. I just pushed into it and tried to find out what he was on about. And it turns out, he said he was sat in the lounge, the front room, watching telly, and there's the big fireplace. And when the house was first built, there was a window at the front, big double window, and there's a window at the back. But the window at the back had been took out, and it had become patio doors through to the outside. And he said he turned to look, and the whole house was empty, which it never was. He said the whole house was empty, and it was just floorboards. And there's a woman sat in a wheelchair, gazing out of the back window, who was really sad to be leaving the house. And he said he just saw this, like a time slip. And then another lady, who he assumed to be a younger lady, a nurse, walked in, got hold of the back of the wheelchair and wheeled the lady out of shot. And then when he looked back, the room was back to normal again. Now, that's a whole area of investigation, because your brain, your actual brain functions, the fabric of your brain, begins to change when you've got Alzheimer's dementia. And it's the bits at the back of the brain that give you your psychic abilities, you know, your spiritual abilities. Those bits start to change. And I came away from that wondering if he could see things that we couldn't see. Because you wouldn't make something like that up. And it's totally plausible that somebody who got to the point that where they just couldn't live in the house anymore was sad to see it go. But he didn't just see it, he felt it. He felt the emotion as well. So that was a fantastic story. But he even managed to beat that, because the best one of the lot was when I was actually living there. And he just he came to me this day, and he was like, "That was a hell of a party you had the other night." And I'm like, "We don't have parties. I'm too old for parties, you know what I mean? We don't do that. I'm living in this house looking after this guy who's, you know, he's 88, 89 at this point." And he's like, "Yeah." He said, "You had a fantastic party." He said, "The back garden was full of people." And I'm like, well, that's a bit strange, because the back garden at this point's a building site. You know what I mean? It's like piles of stones, piles of bricks. You know, a couple bits of it are sort of, you know, plant-esque. There's bits where I suppose you could sit if you wanted to. I said, okay, Dad, let's sit down and talk to me. Tell me what's going on. And he said, I was in the back kitchen and looking out into the back garden a couple of nights ago. And he said there were, it's in summer, so it's summer light. And he said there were these people in the back garden, and he started to describe them. He said there was, like, children, a couple of children running around, and then there was a couple of elderly people, a man and a woman, and a couple of other elderly people, and then people who you would imagine would make up a family. So it's a family scene. He's looking at a family scene. He said, and some were sitting, kids were running back in two, but it looked like they were having a bit of a party. So there was food out there as well, stuff like that. But he said it looked a bit odd. So I said, what do you mean it looked a bit odd? He said, well, they were all in fancy dress. I said, okay, tell me what you mean by fancy dress. He said, well, and he just came out with it. He said, well, to be honest, they look like Romans. So you can see where this is going. Yeah. Now, the chances are only I would have been the person that he could have told this story to that makes sense out of it, because what the Romans used to do was they would actually go back to the burials and have feasts at certain times of the year in the graveyards. And they've found graves in this country, even in Chester and places like that, where there are tubes and pipes going down to the burial. And they would share food and they would share drink with their ancestors who were buried in the past. But it wasn't a sad thing. They didn't all stand around there morbid and stuff like that. They would go for a picnic in the graveyard. And what he described, even down to these guys wearing togas and brooches and the dresses that the women were wearing, and Roman-style footwear, and the way the kids were running back into, and they had kiddie shoes on and stuff like that. It was just like straight out of the movies, But my dad's not the kind of person to watch that sort of thing. And how would he have known that they did that in a graveyard? And once you start adding the bits up, it's another time slip. He's seen something. Before that, I've always been convinced that there are burials under the back garden, because they went down for the house, but they never dug the back.
Oh, right, yeah.
So about a metre under, I think if we excavated the whole of the footprint of the back garden, I think you'd start picking the burials up exactly the same as you did on the opposite side of the road.
Yeah.
Because it extended all the way across, I don't think we'd hit any monuments. I don't think there was any really big ones, because they were all at the side of the road, which was further over. It's about 100 yards in front of the property. But certainly smaller ones, burials in urns and stuff like that. So what a perfect description, absolute perfect description of what could have took place on that site.
Yeah.
He passed away when he was 89. We tried to get him to 90. That was my goal. I was determined to get him to 90, but he passed away at 89. Obviously, I'm living there, and I've got my stepdaughter. She came to stay in the last years, and she was helping to look after my dad. And she has a brother who was staying with us at the time. He doesn't stay with us now, but he came occasionally back then. And my dad, his bedroom, from the master bedroom, his bedroom ended up going down to the ground floor. Because then he's got a bedroom, he's got a library, he's got the conservatory, he's got a downstairs toilet, and he's got full access to the kitchen. And we took the front room, and that's our main room downstairs. Shared the kitchen, shared the conservatory, but the rest of that side of the house essentially was his. So he had pretty much the whole of the ground floor of the house, bar one room, right to the very end. So his bedroom is at the front, and this is how his period on Earth came to an end, because I went to bed on the Friday night, and I felt fine. Totally fine. Went to bed at normal on the Friday night. Woke up on what I thought was the following day, and came down, and the stepdaughter said, "I don't think you danced very well." And I'm like, "But he was fine yesterday, when I went to bed yesterday." And she went, that wasn't yesterday. She said, today is Sunday, not Saturday. And I'm like, really? Explain that to me. She said, well, you went to bed on the Friday night, and I tried to wake you up yesterday on Saturday, and I couldn't wake you up at all, couldn't rouse you at all. You've been asleep a day, 24 hours, you lost a day. And I'm like, well, I was fine when I went to bed on the Friday, and I'm fine now. Why would I lose a day? And she's like, well, you have. It's Sunday. I think you need to check in on your dad. I said, well, what do you mean about that? And she said, well, she said, I took him his food on the Friday evening, and beautiful scene. She said he was sat in his chair, looking out the front window, which in our house faces west. So he's watching the sunset in the west. She said it's golden sun streaming in through his front window. He's watching the sunset, put the food down, left him to it, and then just collected the empties at the end of the day, as she normally does. So came in on the Saturday, and he was clearly fast asleep. And that's not unusual, because he would sleep in. He'd sleep in on a Saturday morning or whatever, not get up till the afternoon. But then she took him his food in the midday, and he was still asleep. But she said she thinks she saw him move. So I'm like, okay. Sunday morning, when I've now woken up, we go in, and it's very clear that he's gone. Now that's important for a number of reasons. First of all, he absolutely swore blind. He was never going in hospital. He was never going in an old people's home, and he wanted to die in his own bed at home. Bearing in mind he's living in a supernatural house, so it does relate. This is totally in the right ballpark. And then the other side of it kicks in. He had a belief system that was, it wasn't Christian per se, but he had an extremely strong feeling for the, shall we say, the Jewish way of doing things. You know, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to live on. Yes, there's an afterlife, and when my time is over, they'll come and collect me. Now, I kind of go along with that as well. I've got this thing that, yeah, there's an angel of death out there doing what it does, and it collects you when your time's up. Which, at this point, obviously I've done a bit of the biblical research and stuff like that, so I've got some idea of how the angel of death operates. There's a Jewish legend that says, if somebody's reading the Bible or praying, or reading any form of scripture, then the angel of death can't do anything. It disarms the angel of death. So in theory, if you sat there reading the Bible forever, you would never die, because the angel of death wouldn't be able to get near you. Now it's not in the Bible, it's a Jewish belief. Yes, the angel of death's in the Bible, but if you want to keep the angel of death away, that's what you do. Well, that's what I do. I'm quite active. I'm always reading, especially at night. I get stuff out. I'm always reading biblical stuff all the time. So what's going through my mind is, you beggar, you got me out of the way. You took me out. You knocked me out completely, so I wasn't there on the Saturday. I wasn't there. I wasn't praying, I wasn't reading, I wasn't doing anything. The legend is true. So the angel of death just went, right, you're in my way, I'm going to switch you off. Get me out of the way. And at some point on the Saturday over to the Sunday, my dad got exactly what he wished for. He died peacefully in his sleep. Now, how do we know this? Fast forward a bit. I mean, it's Sunday. What my dad said was, I want old school. I want all the windows open so my soul can go off to the west. And I want a lying state for 24 hours. Well, it's a Sunday, innit? Nobody works on a Sunday. Nobody does anything on a Sunday. And it probably transpired that he passed away in the early hours of the Sunday. That's when he departed. So I just, stepdaughter and me get our heads together and we're like, well, that's what he wanted. Let's just leave him where he is. It's not going to do any harm. 24 hours. There's no heating on. It's not like he's going to start to liquidate in a day. And Monday morning, when everyone's back at work, we'll just sort it out. Which is exactly what we did. Monday morning I went off. I started with the funeral guy. Went off to the funeral place where he was booked in and explained pretty much what I've just explained now, and said, and he's still there. What do we do? And the funeral department were lovely. They were just like, right, we'll walk around the corner and just notify the police. We'll phone the coroner. We're responsible for dealing with the body anyway. Just make sure you're around today, and we'll just come and sort it out. So yet again, my dad got exactly what he wanted. To the letter, he got it. Even if he'd have written it down, it couldn't. It was reliant on circumstance. It was out of everybody's control the way that it happened. Absolutely phenomenal. What a way to go. What a way to depart. Then we got the results back from the coroner. Now, they picked the body up on the Monday afternoon or whatever. They were great because they kind of sneaked him out the back way so nobody knew what was going on. Unmarked van, off he goes. Police were fantastic. They were just like, well, if that's how he's gone, that's how he's gone. No foul play, no trouble at all the rest of it. Just wait and see what the coroner says. But, they said, they're all backed up at Liverpool at the moment, so it might be 3 or 4 weeks before you get any results, and this is when the police left on the Tuesday, because they came back on the Tuesday and told us all this, that and the other. Wednesday morning, and the coroner's on the phone, and he's saying, I just thought I'd phone you up to let you know, put your mind at rest. My dad was a triple heart bypass patient, and the coroner just said, catastrophic heart attack. Said, wouldn't have even known it happened. Like flicking off a light switch. So he went to sleep. He went to sleep on the Saturday night, early hours of Sunday morning. Bang! Gone in an instant. What a fantastic way to go. I just hope I can book him for one of those. You know what I mean? But that is, again, we're talking now life and death. We're talking about different dimensions. We're talking about a haunted house. We're talking about strange qualities. And I don't think, I'm going to stick my neck out and say, I don't think stories like the ones I've just told, I don't think there are many of them. There are so many unusual aspects. Yeah, things disappear. Yeah, you can do this, that and the other. But ghosts that are in full colour, physical evidence that backs up the presence of things, historical evidence that backs up the presence of things, the angel of death popping by to pick somebody up, you know what I mean? None of these stories are what you hear every day. They're not what you read in the books or see in the movies. And that's the reality of living in a haunted house. Yeah, absolutely.
When people talk about ghosts, like, what's your take? What do you think they are?
Well, the unusual nature of the haunted house that has been in my life and me in it for the last half a century or so has thrown up some interesting questions in that respect, because that first figure that I saw clearly appears to be the spirit of someone who was once alive. So that's, I suppose, by definition, it's an apparition, because what you're seeing is something that previously existed. But that raises loads of questions. Like, number one, why was it in full colour? So it's not it's not that kind of ghost. Why did he come back? Why him, and why then? That raises the issue that maybe from that particular spirit's perspective, they could see time in a different way, because that was a turning point for me. And then you get into this, that's on my mum's side of the family, so many generations back. His DNA is part of my DNA. I'm part of him, he's part of me. If it turns out that he genuinely is Thomas Trow, which I think he is, I think he probably is. And again, it's like he must have had spiritual interest in his day and his time, as far as Victorian era interests were, which gave him some inclination to then appear to me, knowing that I was going to have perhaps similar interests, That's how that one appears, but it doesn't give any answers. There's no reason for that particular spirit to be in that particular house. There's no direct link, no tie-in, no physical property, nothing. The only link to that spirit would be me.
Was you, yeah.
Was me.
Yeah.
So that's very direct.
So when you think about that, and you think about the spirits that have been seen tied in with the building, then we could start talking about the
yeah, that moves on. That moves on. What has become apparent is that what happens and what people see is partially down to them. Now, a lot of people that do paranormal do say, well, any kind of experiment really, the person who's the observer is part of the experiment. You can't escape it. You are part of whatever it is you're experiencing. Which is kind of mostly true, except when you get things like, that gun holster flying across the room, and that happened twice in front of witnesses. Lights in front of witnesses, apparitions in front of witnesses, So you're in a situation there where it's multiple experiences, which you'll get again with cryptids, you'll get again with UFOs, you get it with all sorts if there's a number of people. If it was just me, and I was just wandering through life and stuff was happening in this house, then you could say, well, maybe it's tied to me, maybe it's tied to the property. But this goes bigger than that, because obviously more than one person, could be as many as 15, 20 people over a period of half a century, experience stuff. And again, I'm not convinced that my mum and dad didn't experience stuff. But because of the way they were, especially my mum would be, oh, well, I've just put it down and forgotten where it was,
Yeah.
The reason that moved is there was a truck going past. They're always constantly coming up with, but I'm positive that it didn't just stop when I moved out, clearly not. So it's an unusual house. So it does raise this question, what part does that property play in if that house was built somewhere else and it wasn't sat on a cemetery? What difference would that have made? Because it's still north, south, east, west, encoding the number 13, for better or for worse, with that whole kind of semi-Victorian occultic sort of background thing going on. Would it still function if it was sat somewhere else, I think the ghosts we've got, there is this good argument about encoding, the quartz in the building encode stuff, and I think that's valid if you're seeing something that's a replay. If you're like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and, the white lady comes walking through here and she does this, that and the other, and it's the same thing, it's like a replay of a recording. I have no trouble believing that at all. There is no problem with that, but that's not how the house that I live in works, which again, it takes it outside the boundaries of ordinary ghostiness, if you like, because anything can happen anywhere, anytime, and it's, to some extent it depends on whether the spirit's like the person or not. It has got a life. There's a life in there, Take my dad's time slips out of that, because I think that was something peculiar to his Alzheimer's. He was given the ability to see what we don't see, because we are functioning the way everybody else functions. There's so many incidents where these ghosts are playing with people and they're appearing and disappearing and stuff moves, and why does one person see something and another person doesn't?
It's like the building work, though, isn't it? You've had builders in there, and a lot of times this disturb, when they're disturbing the house, that can cause things to happen as well. Within hauntings.
Well, in all fairness to the situation, my stepdaughter's mum was involved at the beginning of the restoration, and the spirits seemed to absolutely hate her. The house just went dark and cold and horrible, and she had encounters where she felt things. She had something dark came into the lounge and went through her, and her stepdaughter will back me up on that, because she actually saw it happen. She saw something, she doesn't know what, but she saw the reaction that her mum had to it. Needless to say, she only lasted about 18 months and then she went. She didn't end up staying. But her daughter did, so lost a partner and gained a daughter, I don't care. Winner.
What about the neighbours in the area? You've got your neighbours. Did you talk to them, and did they talk about any experience that they have in their own homes?
Well, our house is Edgerton House at the top of Edgerton Street.
Yeah.
So we are like the last house before you vanish off the top of the street. And the bottom end of the street is Manchester Ship Canal. We're semi-detached, so the house that's joined on the side is almost a mirror image of us. It's slightly different. It wasn't built to quite the same scale, but you're looking at it from the front, the only thing you notice, I think, is next door hasn't got the tall chimney. And I think the front door layout is slightly different as well. But anyway, we're not identical. They don't seem to have had any problems. And they've been in there a long time. They've been in there 40 or 50 years.
Or is it that they don't talk about it?
Or is it that,
they're not open to it?
Yeah, I think that's more likely, knowing the folks that live there. However, when you get to the top of the street and you turn right, you're on this avenue called West Avenue. There are a couple of houses along there that have had issues, because that's where the ground starts to rise up again. So the Roman road comes through. One of those houses is on the Roman road.
All right.
It's built on top of it. So that either side of that, those two houses will be on top of fairly significant Roman burial monuments. So they are affected at the top. They get stuff. Then there's interestingly, the Roman road cuts through these houses, and it cuts through the school, goes right through the middle of the school plot, cuts it in half, so it goes under the school. Then it goes down a road called Roman Road. So that is definitely sat on top of the road.
Yeah.
The road actually runs next to the Roman Road. So as you're looking up Roman Road, the actual road is under the houses on the left. That's where the road actually is. So their back gardens are full of burials, So district-wise, yes, there's loads going on. Village-wise, there's one or two haunted places there that have reputations. Funnily enough, one of the pubs does. Quite a bit of stuff happens in the pub, on and off. Where we are, like I say, that's quite a focus. That's the graveyard. It also used to be the Common. Battle of Stockton Heath took place in that area in the Civil War as well, so it's seen a lot of action where we are. There's a lot of reasons why it would be a lively area. And then bringing it right up to date, I mean, it's interesting because somebody went over in a hot air balloon, photographed the village, and managed to catch them building our house in 1924. So you got this double square, with us and next door, and then it comes up and then there's no top on it. You can see the room layouts.
Yeah.
So it's been quite an active area photographically. You can trace the history back. Yeah, for me, for the house, I don't think it's. I think the house, the building, the structure, the location, that plays a huge part in it as an amplifier, as a magnifier. And then what happens in that then seems to rely on the person that it's happening to. So if you're a good person and a nice person and nothing happens, a lot of people come through and it's perfectly normal. If it wants to reveal itself to you, I'll give you two stories. I've got two sons twice, so I've got the older two and the younger two. The oldest of the younger two came to stay. He came to stay a couple of years ago, and he's quite switched on. He's aware, and he slept in my dad's old room. Came to sleep in my dad's old room. No trouble at all. The week goes along, ticking along really well. And then, middle of the night, somebody pushes him. He gets pushed. Now, you wouldn't think anything of that, except the following day when he gets up and takes off the shirt he's wearing to sleep in, there's a handprint on the back of the shirt. And it's not his handprint, it's the wrong size. So he was pushed. Now, that's never happened before. Why it happened to him, I have no idea. But it's something that was the spirituality and the property reacting to him.
Yeah.
Being there, like the ghostly equivalent to a high five,
Yeah.
I'm here. Pay attention. And then another one, because that's a different person. Not normally in the property. Another one again, different again. Friend of mine, a guy called Mr. Potts. His real name's Anthony. Hi Potty, if you're watching this. He was walking past the front of the house, and he looked into the lounge, and there's me dad sat at his desk where he usually sits, the desk in front of him. And he waves, but my dad doesn't really see him. That's not unusual because he's walking past on the street, you know, so he's outside the building. My dad's focused on whatever he's doing. Sees my dad sat there. And he's a regular visitor. Mr. Potts pops in all the time. You know, nothing's happened. He doesn't get freaked out, no ghostly stuff, you know, nothing like that. So he drops in the next week for a cup of coffee like he normally does, and, you know, nice to see your dad, you know, working away at his desk. Well, it definitely wasn't my dad you saw, because he died 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So the house shows you what the house wants you to see.
Yeah.
You know, and that was where my dad would have been. Absolutely no problem at all, described to a T, but he wasn't. So my dad was still working at his desk, even though he died 3 weeks before. He'd obviously popped back because he needed to do something. And that's it. My dad's not been back since. Nobody else has seen him. Nothing else has happened, you know. Must get around to burying his ashes at some point. He's still got his ashes. So you would have thought that would have attracted some kind of spiritual activity, you know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. That's the main thing. I think the main takeaway from what happens, none of it plays according to the rules. Yeah. You know, you can't find it in a movie or a book, or, you know, it doesn't play by the rules. It is what it is. It's unique and it does what it does. You know, one day I might get around to writing it up, you know, as a thing. But that for me, it's, you know, it doesn't function the way you would expect it to necessarily.
So on that note, what is the last thing that's happened? Or should I say, what has happened recently?
Well, very recently. Like I say, it doesn't, as a rule, I've got to say, it doesn't bother me. Nothing really happens to me. Yeah. And if I mislay something, it probably is because I can't remember where I put it. The stepdaughter has mentioned that occasionally, just occasionally, she's aware of something. But it's never malignant, it's never nasty or vicious or anything, and then it just disappears. We've also got the helpful addition of a cat. The cats are great because if anything happens, they're like, you know what I mean, and they can look towards whatever it is that's causing them distress. Nothing's really happened for the cat either. Having been said, my dad only passed away in 2021. So that is fairly recent. So everything I've told you, like, you know, Mr. Potts spotting him at his desk and things like that, you know, that's all within the last couple of years. But it has actually gone quite quiet of late. I've got to say that. It has gone quite quiet. Which is not to say the property doesn't keep throwing up surprises. You know, and the hat's still there under the floor and the burials are still there to be investigated, and we've not done the loft yet. We've not been up in the attic. So, you know, that's to do. So I've got no idea. No idea what's in the loft.
Oh, that'll be interesting once you get to that.
Yeah, and landscaping the garden. Yeah. If we do that, I might just get the guys to go down. We might just do, you know, whatever, 1 metre by 2 metre test trench. And just see if we hit anything.
Your own little archaeological dig.
Why not in my own back garden? You know, an archaeologist that doesn't dig, I mean, that's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that needs doing. It's got more to it. You know, the story hasn't ended by a long shot, you know. And you just know. You know that sooner or later someone's going to walk in through the front door and it's all going to start again.
Yeah. And hopefully, when I walk through that front door, it'll start then.
Yeah, you're quite welcome to pop round for a cup of tea and a butty anytime you like. Come and investigate, and and there's plenty to see, because like I say, there's physical evidence of this there, you know. So I hope that's given you the answers you wanted.
Yeah. And I hope whoever's watching has enjoyed this.
Yeah. Christmas special.
Christmas special, and
just avoid the guy with the big scythe, you know, that's like a, you know, none of that. Have a good Christmas.
And thanks again for coming.
Always a pleasure.